Good evening and welcome to Livid Comics Lair. Tonight's guest is the author of the new, I call it, I guess, a suspense or a thriller novel more than a horror novel. Is a book that I really enjoyed. It's called Come With Me. He's also a musician in a band called Veer. Just a guy that has published a ton of books, novellas, just awesome dude. And we're really excited to have our friend, Mr. Ronald Malfi, on the show tonight.
Yay.
Boom, like that. I gotta get my cam on. There we go. What's up, guys?
Yay. What's up?
How you guys doing?
Mr. Malfi.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, buddy. Appreciate your time tonight. So gonna have some
absolutely.
fun.
Thanks for having me on. I'm glad to be here.
That's a great shirt, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Whatever's closest when I get up. That's what I grab.
I hear you. That's right, COVID chic, buddy. That's what we do these days, you know.
This is a Father's Day gift for my kids.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it.
I don't get much. I just tell them to leave me alone. That's what I get for Father's Day. Just give me like 5 minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
I've got two kids, two girls. One's about to become 11, and the other one is 7 years old.
Oh, nice.
7-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah. There you
You
go.
got a 7-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter. And what Joel's got. Wait, you have all over the place.
I got 3 that I know of. They're 4,
well,
6,
I didn't
and 8.
mean that. I didn't mean that.
I haven't got any
Oh,
Father's Day cards randomly in the mail about somebody who wants to meet me. Yeah.
Oh.
So, yeah, my guys are 4, 6, and 8. They're fun. I got 2 girls and a boy. It's
Nice.
a good age. We went to the fair today. It was a good time. So it's been a long day. So been out with kids. Yeah.
Well,
So-
you mentioned in the intro there, you mentioned you felt like Come With Me was more thriller
I
than
thought so.
horror. Ronald, when you wrote it, were you thinking that, like, because honestly, like, definitely has plenty of horror elements to it, but there is more of a fast-paced, like, thriller vibe to it. I don't know. Compared to some of the other books I've read too, it definitely had that vibe, like Joel said.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? It wasn't anything. When I sit down to write something, I don't kind of pigeonhole it into a specific genre. That's more of the marketing, publishing, the department of the publishers. That's their job. But I mean, it's as much a horror novel as Silence of the Lambs or Jaws or anything like that. The way I look at it, I mean, I have a very broad view of what horror is, and I don't need to just have. Doesn't need to just be vampires and werewolves or that sort of thing. I think there's plenty of horror in the world around us that
Right.
kind of check that box. And, so I don't really worry about trying to infuse the books with anything specific to the genre. I just kind of tell the story, and whatever people determine it is, that's their thing, but yeah, I mean,
Like
for me,
real life horror, right? So it's exactly.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, man. I just got through it like right in time, right before the show, so I'm just fresh out of my mind. So I finished the book yesterday afternoon. So yeah, it was awesome. I was like, you're such a good wordsmith with all the stuff, like your descriptive things. And one of the things I wanted to point out is like everywhere that you talk about, it seems like something that I think anybody could relate to. Like we've all been to like a crappy motel. We've all been to like, by or near like a shitty, crappy old factory kind of building, right? Like all of those things are places that everybody can relate to in their mind. So the way you described it was so eloquent and so well done. I was like, this is awesome. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, that's where, I think there's a touch of beauty in some of the mundane stuff that we see every day. And, a lot of the stuff that I write kind of touches on that. I'm big into atmosphere. I'm big into mood when I write. I try to almost make the atmosphere of the book be as much of a character as possible. So it's all about feel and emotive, vibes and stuff when I'm doing that. And I mean, rundown motels and factories. And I love stuff like that. I have a harder time writing about opulence because I guess I have less experience with that. So it's the rundown stuff I'm really good at.
Yeah, I ran a rundown motel for a while. My parents were kind of the managers there, so we lived in a house that was adjacent to it. So I'm like, I could totally relate to this, and I really do believe that some of the people there were sketchy, like in your book. So it's like I've been right through all these things. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I used to love, especially whenever I'd have a book come out, I would do like 3 months of a book tour. So I hit a bunch of the big chain stores, Barnes and Noble and whatever. And then I hit some of the mom and pop stores in between. And I do that for about 3 months every time I had a book out. And I have stayed in some like freaking dives, man, where it's like, you just know you're dying that night, something else is in that room with you. So I am a fan of creepy motel rooms. There's something there. They're a gateway to another universe somehow. You find that motel room and you're going through. There's another book.
Probably with that band, right? Probably with your band too, right? Probably stayed in some sketch joints with playing on the road and stuff. And
yeah, you know what? More so back when I was younger. I have reached the point in my life where to continue performing in my band, the decision was to be like, if I can't drive home at night, I'm not doing this. We're not taking the show.
It's a 40+ club, buddy. I'm with you.
Man, I exactly. We were talking before the show started about like gigs and stuff that we played, and I think I'm trying to think of what band it was. I think it was it Buck Cherry? I can't remember what band we were playing with, but we got the offer to finish the rest of their tour. They came into Baltimore. We opened for them when they came to Baltimore, and when we're going back west, we got the opportunity, the offer to play the next 40 shows for like 2 months until they went back home. It was a pretty cool gig, and I wasn't working, writing, or doing anything at the time. And I thought we kind of thought about it, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. That's just like a lot of work and a lot of sleeping in a van with 3 other dudes.
Oh, yeah.
And,
you got it.
And I'm playing it down. I mean, the reality is like some of the other guys in the band couldn't take the time off from their day jobs to do that. But the reality was, like you said, I'm a 44-year-old guy. I got 2 kids at home and a wife who's going to be damn pissed if I say, hey, I'm going to hop in this van now for 2 months and make sure they go to school and cut the lawn, lady.
John and I have Comic Con on September 18th, 19th over in Manchester, and like we're gonna have to leave the wives at home for like 2 days, so we'll probably have to come home and bouquet of flowers and do a lot of try to smooth that over just for 2 days.
With the books, that's what I do. So that's what my wife allows me to go out and then promote the books. Then when I throw the band on top of it, she's like, are you come on, what are you doing to me here? Yeah.
Right.
So I understand. I try to keep an equal balance.
Yeah. It's but I guess at the end of the day, it's part of what you got to do, right? If you got to get out there and promote the books. Do you go? Hey, Josh, do you go out there nationwide when you're doing your book tours, or do you stick in that region?
It depends. I mean, clearly everything now is all.
Well, yeah.
I haven't really done. I've done one Barnes and Noble signing since this new book came out. I just pulled out of everything I normally do with a book release. But no, I've done. Probably the biggest tour I did was when I had a book called Cradle Lake that came out in 7 or 8 years ago. And I was, as part of that tour, I was invited to speak at the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Weekend Writers Retreat or whatever. So I went out there. I did a book signing there. I did a speaking engagement with them. I got to, I had a great time. I met a bunch of people there, and then I just did book signings coming back, from out west, and it was a blast. But again, 8 years ago, the mileage wasn't as rough back then.
Right.
It's a little easier. The tires, the tread's showing now.
my bed in the van was we put a cooler between the two. We had a G10 Chevy van. We put a cooler between the 2 front seats, and I slept across that. And to this day, I still have back problems, probably from doing that. 3,000 miles a week and then sleeping on that. We had 2 bands, so there was 11 of us in a 15-passenger van with 2 bands worth of equipment. And that thing was rank, man. After like a week, we were like dying in there, going down the Tampa.
Great memories, though, right? Right, yeah.
I mean, here I am talking about it, right? So obviously, it's great.
I can't even imagine that though. Like we went camping for 4th of July and we had an air mattress, a nice, expensive air mattress, and we did one night, and I told my wife, I'm like, I that was terrible. Like, and I slept on an air mattress, and like, I can't even imagine sleeping in a van, going on tour. It's like, but as a kid, I was sleeping in a sleeping bag on the ground, but now I can't even sleep on an air mattress in a tent. So
you find out who your friends are, who's real fast. who don't get along with either real fast. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, Ronald, I got a kind of quick question to you. Like, I was very curious about the way you approach your writing, and I read that you have to write at least 15 pages a day, and that seems kind of very professional to me when it comes to creation. It's like we don't usually establish, I'm going to write 10 pages today and whatever tomorrow. And has it always been like that, or it just something that you started doing after you became noticed? How is your take on that?
Yeah, I remember saying that for an interview a long time ago, and what it was is basically the answer to how much do I write in a day, and it was roughly about 15 pages. It wasn't like I set my mind to writing 15 pages. It was at the time, that's roughly what I was doing at the time. The older I got, and with each subsequent book, you'd think things would get easier. It actually gets a little tougher. So I wound up kind of giving myself, I don't have the energy and the zeal that I had when I was like in my 20s writing books. So I just, it could take me, the book right before Come With Me was Bone White. That took me about a year to write. Come With Me took me 8 months, around there. The book I'm writing now, I owe that publisher 2 more novels. So the book I'm writing now took me 2 months to write, only because I waited too long and I had a deadline. Wow. So I had to step up. But you know what? The writing for me, the writing part is easy. The hard part is the months of thinking about this stuff before because I don't really outline or take notes or whatever. I kind of I have an idea and I have characters and I kick it around in my head and I see where I think it should go. And once I get an idea of how it should start, then I start writing chapter 1 and I go from there. That's how I start. And I see where that story takes me based on kind of the blueprint that I have in my head. So even though the actual sitting down in a chair and writing may take a few months, I've got months before that of just stewing on this thing, or my wife knows when I start getting into new book mode, because I get up late, I don't shower, I drink a little much, I walk around the house in boxer shorts and a robe, and I just stare off into into the walls, and I write like I don't outline or anything, but I will make notes on like things. Like I'll walk by I'm like, somebody should say this at some point in the book, and I'll write something down. Like that's how I do it. So she knows, all right, he's in that place. Let me just not, give him his space and let him do his thing. So I try to, because I know I'm a bit of a monster when I have to do that. I try to do it as quickly as possible. It's like pulling off a Band-Aid for the sake of my marriage, the well-being of my family. But yeah, so I mean that number is kind of a rough estimate. I used to do that every day. Now when I write a book, I may not write anything for a few days, and then I will sit down and I will do 40 pages in a 12-hour period. So that's just how it, how it comes to me now.
Yeah, cool. The way you say that, you sound pretty much like you are kind of your own character. You have created this persona, and probably, that is just my guesswork, that persona is so big that you have to express that on pages, transforming that persona in different characters. Would you think I'm too far away from that?
Well, I don't. You know what? I'm not sure if I grasp 100% of what you're saying, but I think that.
All right, let me rephrase that. I think that every creator, like we only can put on paper what we are.
Yeah.
But when you are a writer, you have a better chance to do that because you're using words. Like I'm an artist. I use paintings and drawings, which is like I can go without being noticed forever, but it's me there all the time. But when you're a writer and you're creating content, sometimes you are giving away a lot of your personality. And when you are creating so many characters for a book, how do you think you can share those pieces of you on each character? How do you think of them when you are putting them in the plot? Like, okay, this is the bad guy, and I'm going to put my view of a bad guy must look like or must behave. And
Yeah.
the same when it comes to a hero. It's like how do you do that? Or you just go completely off the rails and do your research and do
No, I
something
mean,
else?
I'm a firm believer in nobody is all good or all bad, and the kind of fiction I write that happens to lend itself towards protagonists versus antagonists. You got to keep in mind that when you're writing this stuff, these are all really people with in their mind, even though we may not agree with it, they have their own genuine motivations and reasons and beliefs why they think what they're doing is the right thing. A bad guy in a novel may not think of himself as a bad guy. He's got something else in his mind, propelling him to do what he's doing. And I think if you have a bit of empathy or just an empath type of connection with the characters that you write, you're able to tap into every character's motivation and how then realistically they would react in the situations you create. And that's one of the reasons I don't outline my stuff, is because I don't want to write some sort of formal manifesto that now have to follow as I write this organic novel and make these characters who I want to develop a life of their own follow a blueprint that I set out ahead of time. I find it very restrictive and kind of contrived to do it that way. So I just kind of let them be who they are, and to address the comment you made about like myself going into some of this stuff. I mean, yeah, I guess there's a bit of my personality that kind of gets into anything that I write, but it's also observation of other people and people I've met in my life and friends I've had or enemies I've had, or all of that stuff kind of goes into the soup bowl, and you stir it up as they're all ingredients, and you just kind of say, all right, here's what it's going to be. I mean, every time I sit down and write and I get to a certain part of a scene, I find myself going, this one thing that happened to me when I was 8 years old, I remember it, and it fits perfectly right here. Yeah. And it's amazing how you're able to kind of pluck those things and say that, wow, how organic this thing becomes, because you're actually taking real snippets and adding them to the fiction. I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question exactly, but
yeah.
No, that's good.
Ray Bradbury kind of talked about that. He said, Montag in Fahrenheit 451 just kind of came to him while he was out walking one night. He's like, I had about 90 pages of Fahrenheit tapped out, and all of a sudden Montag came and told me his story. So he added like another 150 pages of Fahrenheit just based on that. He's like, I didn't know, because I didn't know what the character was going to do, but he told me, and I put it in the book. So that stuff happens. That's really cool when that happens. And I think in the art that can happen too, right? Maybe Ruggiero can talk to that too, but the character, what they look like, what they're doing, their mannerisms, just kind of comes out naturally. How they would move and how they would act and what their facial expression would be in the situation.
And I think if you're doing any art correctly, whether it's music or writing or painting or anything, you're almost a bit of a medium for something else that's transmitting through what it is that you're putting out there. and that's kind of a romantic way to look at it, but it often feels that way too, that you're, a book like, with Come With Me, that book just kind of came out of me without really having to think of the machinations of writing,
Yeah.
and not every book is that way. Some books are harder to write than others because they're a little clunkier. They're a little more parochial in just getting them on the page. Other ones just come out of nowhere, and that's the magic. That's the real. That's what I think every artist looks for.
Yeah. So when you do, because actually that was going to be one of the questions I asked you, but you answered it before I even got to it, so that's great. Was the outline versus just kind of going with the feel. But so when you go the way that you do it, where you just kind of have an idea of where you want it to head. So how do you, because obviously when you think of the plot of a book, right, they get the certain acts, like the 3 acts or whatever, like, so how do you know when you're getting to that point? Like if you get to a certain point and you're like, all right, this has to be the middle of the book, and then this is where we're going to start heading towards the climax. Like, do you have a rough page outline in your mind, like total pages, or do you just kind of go until the story's told, basically?
Well, I mean, I go until the story's told, but I've done it enough times where I could, as I'm writing, I could kind of intuit how big this book's going to be page wise. And I could sense when I'm getting to the middle and then where I have to go from there. The only you'd think I'd learned my lesson, but I have found that where I think the ending of my books should be, I wind up ending them in my head and on the page about 20 pages earlier. Like I realize I don't need to say the rest of what I thought I needed to say. It ends here. And that's, I continually surprise myself with that. You'd think I'd pick up on it by now, but no.
Oh, you mentioned the book you just did within a couple months or whatever. I saw your post about the outline of that. That sounds freaking amazing. I don't know. I think you were joking on the comment when you said the publisher's probably going to kill you for this. But are you able to give a rough synopsis of the new book that you just finished a draft on, or
for the new one?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? The only reason I posted that is because I saw for anyone who wants to. I see the chat going. So if any listeners want to go check it out, the Amazon. UK Amazon.co.uk actually has the book already listed, and so I'm like, wow, well, that talk about lighting a fire to finish by a deadline.
Yeah, no pressure
no pressure there. No.
So I really didn't have a problem cutting and pasting their synopsis for that response that you're talking about. But no, the new book that's coming, it's a novel called Black Mouth, and it's about a guy who is basically he's a fall down alcoholic who's got a lot of trauma in his past, particularly in his childhood, and a lot of guilt over walking away from his family, to include his disabled brother. And a series of events happen that reunite him with his brother and a couple of his childhood friends in the process. And in doing so, they have to revisit a particular traumatic event that happened to all of them when they were kids, and kind of flush that out in the present, and while also dealing with their own past traumas with that. So, my books tend to, my plots tend to be spoiler laden. I don't know how else to, So
yeah.
It's tough to, even with Come With Me, it's a tough book to describe without spoiling it.
Yeah, I tried to do that for my mother. I tried that for my mother-in-law today because she doesn't like horror books, and I was like, I think you'd like this one because it's not like gory and things. And she was like, well, what's it about? And I'm like, how do I? And I started talking about it. My wife's like, don't go any further. Don't go. I'm like, I'm not. Like, to your point, it's hard to talk about it without kind of getting into some spoiler alerts or whatever. So
I know, and it's tough for the publisher to come up with copy to sell to, because these publishers then go to the bookstores to get them stocked. And they're like, well, what do we say? I'm like, well, you can tell the bookstore whatever you want. They're not reading it.
Even the synopsis that they provide on Amazon is like, it kind of gives things away, So, I mean,
the original one that the publisher came up with before I said, well, I don't do that, that gave a lot away, and it's, I guess it's more enticing to know more details, but it kind of spoils the ride, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of my stuff, but particularly Come With Me, it's best to go in blind, really.
Absolutely.
Kind of see what it's about.
I did.
I went in blind too. Yeah.
Same with you. Yeah. Like when I was reading it, I saw that there was a lot of praise for it, and obviously I liked a lot of your other books, and I'm like, I don't want to know what it's about, and I felt like it made the book even better, to be honest, because I've said many times it's one of my favorite books I've read this year. So, but yeah, and I didn't mean to throw you on the spot about your new book. Obviously, you're not promoting that yet. You probably haven't even thought out like how you want to explain it.
I'm still working on the ending right now.
Yeah,
yeah. You don't have to tell us.
Yeah, but so I was I posted something the other day about when I discovered you for the first time, and I don't know if this is like this for everybody else, but like I have this weird tendency to remember where I was when I read a certain book. Like I remember looking for new horror authors. That's when I discovered Brian Keene, and then I started to branch out a bit, and I wanted to find something themed around like Christmas. So I typed like Christmas horror in on Google, and that's when Snow came up. And so I started looking into that, and I was like back in my apartment days, which pisses me off because I can't find that book anywhere. There's a box of books from my apartment that got lost in the move like 7 years ago. So, but so that got me hooked on your books. And then I remember reading The Narrows, and I don't know, is it like that for all you guys too? Like I remember exactly where I was when I read pretty much every book I've ever read.
Me, yeah.
I don't go any place, so it's either in my bed or on my porch. It's just, honestly, those are my two realms these days, right? It's like,
same here. Same here for about 3 years. It's been the same shit.
I have read a couple, books down in like the Cayman Islands. I remember that on a honeymoon or something like that, because that's all you can do down there. You do the 4 cool things in the Caymans, and you're done, and then you're there for 6 more days reading books. So, yeah, I remember some of the books there. To your point,
I remember when I read Stephen King's It. I was probably around the same age as the kids in the book when they're children, 11, 12, 13 years old, whatever it was, and I have a very distinct memory of just being so in love with this book. I'll be honest with you. I was not a huge reader prior to finding Stephen King. Stephen King hooked me. Damn. And the reason I wanted to read it is because I remember hearing a bunch of guys in school. I guess some kid got his hand on his mother's copy of the book, and they're like, "Oh, there's a sex scene with all the kids. You got to read." I'm like, "Oh, all right, sounds good." So I get this paperback. I'm like, "All right, sweet." Now, and I started reading it, looking for a sex scene, right? And I fell in love with this book, and I remember, like, even in the middle of the night, my dad would come in my room and said, "Hey, it's like 2 a.m. Shut your light off. Go to bed." I shut my light off. I go to bed, and then I take the book to my window and read it in the light of the lamppost in the street coming in. And that's my memory of that novel, reading in the lamppost light every night of this book. And, spoiler alert, the sex scene is like on page 1000.
Yeah, I was like, that's a big book to find a sex scene.
Yeah. And just kids, there's easier ways to find porn, I'll tell you. Yeah. But by the time I got there, it was not,
you didn't even care at that point.
I didn't care. I was so in love with this book.
The young generation doesn't know the struggle that we went through as young guys trying to get porn in our lives.
Well, that's a whole other show. I mean, these kids are computers. I remember having to go into like a 7-Eleven and like, I'll take this beef jerky and this bag of magazines.
You hide it between 2 others, Sports Illustrated and National Geographic.
Like, I don't know, my dad wanted it. Whatever. Yeah.
I have to. So everything you just said about it, like that's the book that got me into horror. I mean, I read like children's horror, like the Tales to what I can't remember the name of the movie, the book now. They made a movie of it recently.
The stories.
Yes, that I read Goosebumps, like whatever. But I read it when I was in 8th grade, and a 1,000-page book for an 8th grader to read that. Like, that was my first real novel that wasn't like kids themed. And same thing. So I would have I had a nightlight, like a little reading light, and I shared a room with my brother. So I would pull my blanket over my head and I would just sit there reading it till like 2 a.m. And like that's what made me want to write horror. So it's cool to hear you say that.
I think so many people probably, I see even in the comments, Sean mentioning about a flashlight, reading under his bed. Man, I mean, that was it's almost like a rite of passage to read a scary book under your sheets with a flashlight, right? I mean, that's awesome.
Well, my brother didn't read books. He was annoyed. So my brother, I'm a twin, and my brother didn't understand why I liked reading books so much, but he would get so irritated when I would sit over there reading at night. So that's why I was even under the blankets in the first place. But he said we had a book project in school, and he said he read The Lost World, and he wrote a paper, and there's scenes in the movie that are not in the book, and his paper was based off the movie, and the teacher called him out. So,
dude, let me tell you something real quick. When I was in high school, I was in an AP English class only because my dad insisted I go to like an AP English class. So I go there. I barely passed the class, and I was a bit of a dick anyway. Like I would turn in my like writing assignments in like blue and red crayon and like 3D glasses so the teacher could read it. But I was a jerk. But when I went to go take the AP exam for this class, it's like pick a novel and write a synopsis on it or a thesis. I'm like, I didn't read any of this crap. There's no Stephen King on this list. So I'm going through it. I'm like, oh, there's Frankenstein. Okay, I can write about that. So I do the whole, here's what Frankenstein's castle symbolizes, and here's Igor's character, and here's all this stuff, and I write this whole thing, and I pass, and I get the college credit, and I'm like, oh, sweet. Years later, I read Frankenstein. None of that shit is in there. None of it. It was all in the movie. I'm like, either these guys thought I was so stupid, they're like, just give this guy credit, or they didn't read the damn book either.
Or the teacher read your report. She's just like,
or that.
Yeah. I used to do my move. My move was the first chapter, a random middle chapter, and the last chapter. That's what I would write about. That was my move in school, man. I did no homework. I worked a full-time job when I was in school. I worked 3 to 11 after school, so I didn't have time for homework. Yeah, because I wanted to buy stuff. I was a crazy kid, so I was like homework. Whenever you're copying the kid that had the class before you when you get in, I do all that stuff. So.
I played that game too.
Yeah, I think it's a musician thing too, because we were like touring around, man. So like we're up in New Hampshire, and I'd have a show in Torrington, Connecticut that night. So my dad would write me notes to get out of school at like 12:45, so I could drive to Torrington to play a show that night. And everyone's like, "You're leaving class again? What are you doing?" I'm like, "I got a show tonight." It was a weird time, but I had a cool dad. He's like, "Yeah, go play your band." Just like
awesome,
yeah, right. It was super cool. Yeah, he's a good guy. So yeah,
you're supposed to be learning, right? Well, there it is.
Well, I mean, I learned probably more on the road than I would say in some advanced, calculus trigonometry class that I've never used to this day, right? But I learned business relationships, how to communicate with people, right? And then obviously music is mathematical, all right? So there's a lot of elements to that, marketing and all
I don't think there's anything better than when you're a young kid in a band that you form with your friends and learn to create your own hierarchy of how to function as a unit. I think it's brilliant because it's the one thing, even if you play organized sports or anything like that. I love basketball. I played basketball in school, but you always got a coach or an adult or somebody telling you what to do. When my friends and I got in my basement, picked up guitars and said, we're going to play some music now and book some shows and play some gigs. And we were like 16, 17 years old. It's all on you. You have to learn all that stuff that until that point adults did for you. I think it's the greatest experience a kid could go through.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, it was great. Just learning how to get along, right? And then without arguments. And then when you get your first like shitty kind of contract, like going through that, we got approached with one, and it was going to be like a nickel an album, like 5 cents, right? I read all the fine print, and all the guys were like, "Yeah, let's do it." They didn't see that part, and I saw it. I picked right up on that. I'm like, "This is a shit contract. Like, don't do it." And they thought I was being an asshole. I'm like, "No, dude. Like, it's bad. Like, don't do it."
Yeah. Most like legit bands, that's a similar contract that they got.
Oh, yeah. It was like the standard issue that they sent out.
It's more archaic than publishing. Yeah, it's bizarre.
You know what? I say this a lot on the show too, but we're finding out in the indie comic world is that there's so much similarities to like the indie music world with like networking and helping each other out and trading, gigs like this or get on our show, get on your show, whatever. And it's kind of cool because I've been 25 years removed from that. So getting it back, it's like, oh, this is still here. It's just different because the music scene obviously changed a lot, from when we were playing in like the late 90s, early 2000s era. It's changed quite a bit, obviously. And the collaboration's different like this, it's all different. So,
well, also the view of some of this stuff has changed too. Whereas, back when I started playing music, which was in high school and through college and right out of college is when I started, the goal was to get a record deal. You wrote your music, you played your shows, you did the A&R rep, showcases, and you wanted to get a record deal because there was really no other way to make it as a musician. That does not exist anymore. I mean,
no, not at all.
It's not something anybody that I know is even chasing, and that's hugely different than when I first started. Publishing there's publishing has changed drastically with self-publishing or POD books, and there's a million avenues for anybody to get their stuff published. But I will say that I think industry-wise, there's still a disparity between, if you self-publish stuff, some people will say that is different than traditional publishing. However, if you record and release and produce your own music, you are a renegade now. You know what I mean? Like, there's power behind it. It's a weird how it doesn't translate to all mediums all media. It's unusual, but I see it in the different things that I'm involved in. And it's kind of interesting to watch how people perceive that.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. When you write a book or you do comics, you have to print it out. Like, you still need some media just to spread your works. But when it comes to music, that's quite different. It's another story. Like, some people here in Brazil, they are getting so many great deals when it comes to doing shows in theaters and arenas, and they don't need anybody else to promote it. They do that on their own. They use their social media, and they have just cut the middleman. Mm-hmm. making more money. They are more happy, and there's no crap anymore. Well, the only thing is that you can make a living out of selling your stuff. You cannot sell records anymore, but that's all right for them.
Well, and that's the big difference, and that was even something that I needed to wrap my head around as I embarked on this newer band that I'm in now, which is, back when I was younger, bands made money from touring and selling records. Records are like business cards now. You record an album and it's free on YouTube. You can stream our band's my band's first album. Our company put it up on, it's all on YouTube. It's free. It's promotion for the shows and the merchandise that you sell. And my brother John, who's the drummer in my band, and he's also our marketing guru and was, his outlook is a band today is a marketing machine that creates merchandise that also happens to play music. And it's a very interesting, and it sounds very, for me, I'm an artistic guy. So that sounds, the antithesis of what I want to hear, but I get where he's coming from with what he says. And it's proven, financially for the band to be factual. And it's kind of, to a degree that's kind of sad because it's not about the music you're creating, but, it's just the reality of it. I mean, music is free and it's out there and people are just giving it away and that's where it is. So the best thing I can say about that is I think the people who do it love it because there's really no return at this level, other than wanting to do it.
Yeah, some of the best artists that were the most successful is they retained ownership of their art. Like Dave Matthews was really big on that. So he's getting the band is getting a larger cut of the merch sales right? That was a big thing. A lot of bands don't have that too. They don't design their shirts, they don't design their imagery and that kind of stuff. So they have to outsource that, and they're paying a cut of that. But if they retain the ownership of that royalty for that, they're actually making more money on that stuff than the music. To your point, and I said this on another show too, like 9 Inch Nails, or like I think their last like 4 albums, like basically put it up for free on their site with a donation button. So you know, and they made more money doing that. They said, and Trent was like, hey, people are going to get it. Like, you know, to your point, they're going to get it anyway for free. They're going to get it, right? But there's people that have the means that really like the band that might say, hey, man, you've changed my life. You've been really influential to me. Here's $1,000 for this album. Well, they would have paid, you know, $14.99 or whatever the heck it is these days. I don't know. I haven't bought a CD in forever because I got Spotify. So
I don't know if there's a band out there that I would pay $1,000 for their album. But no, I do believe in paying, you know, if I like what you're doing, you deserve to get paid for it. It's work. It's work, right. and I appreciate the talent that is at the forefront of the blood, sweat, and tears that are behind it. I recognize that. You know.
Are you selling like book merch with the band too? Does that like cross at all, or you guys keep that separate? Or
it's weird. Those two things don't really crossbreed.
Interesting.
It has been interesting. I thought once the band started, I'm like, oh, well, you know, everybody who reads my stuff will probably be interested in the band, and it's really not been that way. So for the most part, I haven't really blended the two. You know, we've got a show coming up. We're playing a festival on September 11th for it's a charity festival for first responders and the military, and some people who are coming to that show had hit the band up and asked if I would be bringing copies of the new book and stuff. So I'll do that, and I'll have them at the table for people to get. But mostly, it really doesn't blend over. It's kind of weird. I expected it to, but it didn't really do that. I guess it's two different.
I can see you having like a stack of books there, right? Like, hey, while you're here, like, pick up a book. You know, oh, you're that guy? Yeah, I'm that guy. So,
well, look, I mean, and I get it. Like, I most of the clubs and the places that we play as a band, nobody's going to want to be drinking all night, watch our band play, and then walk around with a book under their arm. I get it. All right,
true. But there's us weirdos that did that. You know, us weird reader guys.
I do that, but so. You know, I'm that guy.
Yeah.
Well, I sit at the bar by myself and not want to talk to anybody, and I read my book. And
exactly.
I sing on stage, and then I come back and I read my book. That's what I do.
Some shitty band gets up, you fuck off for a little bit, read the book, whatever.
Man.
Oh man! You know what is even harder is to get your family and friends mingled with your public. It's quite impossible.
I try to keep that separate.
My brothers, they don't know what I do.
Rogero's got a secret band. He never talks about it. He's a good singer, but he's humble too. So yeah,
that's a terrible marketing ploy right there.
Yeah, we're coming back next week.
Nice.
Next week.
Nice.
I would say I feel like so Joel and Rogerio they do music. I feel like the majority of our guests do music, and I'm sitting over here and I can play 3 notes on a guitar. You know, I feel like kind of a loser when we have people on.
That's all you need sometimes. A lot of bands have made it with 3 chords.
You can have a buck band.
Well, he didn't say chords. He said notes. So I don't know.
It could be alternative, right? Alternative.
Yeah, I don't even talk the right language. Yeah, no.
Notes, all right.
I tried to teach myself. My wife got me guitar lessons a few years ago because she knew I wanted to play, and it was like a month worth of like one session a week. So I'm not going to learn that much. I just wanted to learn the basics and then try to teach myself. And I downloaded this app on my phone, and I felt cool that I could like play you know, some songs a little bit, and then I would play them for like my son, and he'd be like, what is that? Like, I'm like, man, is it that bad? Like at that time he was 5 or 6. I'm like, damn. He's not even impressed right now. Yeah, so what do you
Sean said you got different skill sets. That's all. It's all right.
Yeah,
we can't all be the same person. It would be boring as hell. I dated a girl that was like me, and I was like, this isn't gonna work, hon. You gotta go. This sucks.
No, I don't believe in that. I believe that if you keep on doing it, you're gonna get better.
I truly feel like if I kept trying with the guitar, it would have worked out. But then, like, now I have a 3-year-old daughter, and like she would come and jump on top of the guitar when I was sitting there trying to like learn a song, and I'm like, all right, maybe in a few years, but
yeah, in a couple of years.
Yeah, we'll see. But what do you, what do you, doing your band? You might have said it earlier, and I missed it, Ronald. But
I'm the singer, and I play rhythm guitar for the band. I write the music for the most part.
nice. Well, that makes sense.
Obviously,
Yeah.
as a writer.
Yeah.
I find it to be a good. Whenever I hit writer's block with writing books, I can switch gears and start playing music, and it kind of frees up. I start playing music, and it frees up the book part of my brain a little bit. So I got like these two tracks going at once. It's been beneficial to kind of do it that way.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about your books while you're playing, like on stage? You like ever get like your mind starts wandering? Does that ever hit you at that moment, or are you totally like you're able to divorce that from each other?
I completely divorce it. In fact, I've had I'm friends, obviously with a lot of writers who have hit me up. They're like, "Oh, we should write I got a story idea for a haunted band or something." I'm like, dude, I hate those concepts. I have because there are two things that I love, which means I want to enjoy them independently. I don't know how else to explain it. Like if I'm watching a music documentary, don't make it a ghost story. Or if I'm watching a horror movie and then all of a sudden this band shows up and they're recording an album, well, now I want to see them record the album. I don't care about your ghost story. I want to see the album recorded. So yeah, I'm weird like that. I like the separation of it because they're kind of in my head. They're very mutually exclusive. They're their own things, and I don't want to muddy one with the other. Because
that's not weird. It makes a lot of sense.
Either one, 100%. I don't want to crossbreed that.
I do have an itch to do some type of a comic series about some of the funny stories that happened back in the scene and on the road and things.
Well,
they're just some of those. They're just such fun little stories and that was such a popular time, man. It was like, if people were, they're our age now, they're in that genre, they remember that. They could be like, oh, I remember when that happened. If you put that into something sequential, they might pick up on
roughly that. What years were you doing that?
I played 93 through like 97, and it was really good up in New England, man. You could go out to like just a cafe on a Wednesday night, and there'd be 300 to 400 kids there, and it was like all the time. And I think that's changed. Maybe I'm just an old man looking back, retrospectively, but it feels like it will never be that way again. Because I went back into it in like 2008 to like 2010, and it wasn't the same. There was like 20 people, 30 people, and people just used to go because there was no money. It was like what, $3, $4, $5, like $1 a band, $1 for the venue, and you go see a lot of bands, and you see some good bands. I mean, we remember we played with Dropkick Murphys up here, right? It was $3 to get in. It was like us, them, and their girlfriends. We didn't have girlfriends because we were a bunch of dorks, right? So, but now that band is like, they're pretty big. My brother-in-law is going to see it. I'm like, just out of curiosity, how much are you paying for tickets? He said $65. I'm like, dude, we used to be $3, to go see these guys. You could stand right next to them up front, they were nobody. It's awesome back then. Such a cool scene, but a lot of good bands came out of there. New England was a hot pot, man. And even like Maryland, we were talking before the show, like that was a good scene too. Kind of a little bit later on, I felt, but maybe I just didn't reach down to Baltimore enough at that time. But it seemed like there was some good bands.
What we were saying, I mean, I think it was probably later. So I'm trying to think. I probably started playing out in clubs in 94. So I was probably like a junior in high school. And that was right when, I mean, what Cobain died in like April 94. So that's at that, to give people a context of where music was at that time. And within the next few years after that, late 90s, I would say, again, my area was Jimmy's Chicken Shack blew up, SR-71 blew up, Good Charlotte blew up. And these are bands that we played with, I mean, actually, when I still go into Annapolis, there's Jimmy Haha from Jimmy's Chicken Shack playing, open mic nights, and he's hanging around and stuff, and he's got a band called Jarflies that play down there, and so we played with all these guys, and just like like a band like Good Charlotte, where they would play at like the Woods Memorial Church Theater with us, for again like a $3 ticket at the door. These guys blew up, and I once they hit it, and my band was still playing locally, these guys came back, and I think one of the brothers was dating Mandy Moore, and they came in a limo, and they're into like a local church where our bands were playing, because they knew we all went to school, and you knew each other, so that was kind of cool. And you're right. I don't know I'm too old now to be in the scene like I was when I was like in my early 20s, but I don't even know if that exists anymore. I mean, I'd like to know like what a scene looks like now. It's different doing it the way we do it now. It's much colder doing it now, I think.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Yeah, it's not as grassroots.
If
it's not as grassroots for sure.
Right.
Definitely not as, I guess, punk or whatever, for whatever that means nowadays. So,
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend. I have a friend who's in the. I have a friend who is in a metal band now, and like he, like they haven't even talked about doing shows yet. They're filming music videos and stuff, and it's like that's like I feel like where things have been heading. It's like it's all on the internet now, like you said earlier, right? So like they're all about production and getting these like nice looking music videos up online.
That's the other. That's another hurdle that we had to get through as a band, and primarily for me is that when we put Veer together late 2016, early 2017, wrote a bunch of songs, played a bunch of shows, recorded an album, released our debut album in like December of 2018, 12-song full-length LP album. We started recording more material. And then like the pandemic hit and we couldn't go in the studio and we couldn't even see each other. We didn't practice. We weren't, we hadn't played a show in like a year and whatever. But the reality is during that time, I started noticing that bands stopped releasing full length albums. They were doing EPs, they were doing singles. And I get it. I mean, it fits the platform that people listen to. When you look at how people listen to music now, I'm an anomaly. I still buy CDs. I listen to literal vinyl records in my living room. I know most people don't do that. I see my kids. They're asking Alexa to play shit, and they're they got it on their phones and their tablets and crap, and it's garbage. And I became that old man where I'm like, your music sounds like crap, kids. Listen to this. And they're like, what the hell is Pearl Jam? Get the fuck out of here. But it's, I guess what goes around comes around. But it is different to get it out of your head to say, we don't need to write 12 songs and release an LP. We can do something else, and I'm the holdout on that. My brother, again, the marketing guru, is like, we'll do a song. Here's our next single, and we'll shoot a video and put it out, and that'll be it. And we'll get our streams or whatever the hell I don't even know, whatever. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. Spotify and all this stuff. You can get. I mean, we got songs on there that are. I mean, we're not a huge band, all right. We're not touring the country. We get our best songs maybe have 40,000 to 30,000 streams, 40,000 streams. It's nothing. It counts for nothing. It pays for it pays for the rum that I drank out of this glass, maybe.
Right.
So
if it pays, you're up ahead of us.
Well, it barely does anything. I mean, it's almost not worth the hassle of having to say, "Send me that money."
Oh God! Actually, I remember paying my beers with the money that I got from playing, and I was owing the restaurants at the end.
Yeah,
you had a tab that was better, higher than what you made.
Oh my God, not that successful. No, not really.
Especially, and you probably do the same thing where it's like you're there early, you do a sound check.
Yeah.
Your band plays late. You're hanging around. Your friends show up. You're in a good mood. You start buying drinks, and everybody's having. By the end of the night, it's like, hey, thanks for playing. Here's $300, and your bar tab is like $450.
And then you go 100 for a bottle of whiskey. Oh, fuck!
A good payment for us was a place to stay and a meal. That was like when we were on the road, man. That was, hey, let us crash on your couch in your living room and give us a dinner. That was awesome. Payment, gas money. That's how we were getting by. That was it. Awesome time. Oh, in your opinion, Ron, who's the greatest frontman in the history of rock and roll?
Oh, geez, man, that is tough.
I got one that comes right off my mind, but I'll see if yours jives.
I mean, there's so many easy go-tos. I mean, like Freddie Mercury or
there you go. That's the one I was gonna say.
No, don't even go there. Don't even go there. Like that. There are three of them that you just leave them out.
Scott Weiland. Scott Weiland, right?
I will agree 100% with Scott Weiland. I think, and not only that, I mean, not just frontman, but what a talent that guy had.
Yeah.
I mean,
You know, I was also kind of, you mentioned Kurt Cobain died. I was kind of taken aback when Lane Staley died. Like, nobody cared. Nobody cared. And that guy was equally as influential. And Jerry Cantrell, to this day, still writes a lot of, like, stuff for pop musicians. And, like, that band just totally was in the shadow of Nirvana. And they did so many great things. Yeah, Sean says Mick Jagger, too. Yeah, that was number 3 on my list, was Mick Jagger for sure. Yeah.
Mick Jagger. Yeah. You know, love him or hate him, I'd say Bono from U2.
I have no problem. Everyone's like, he's egotistic. I'm like, who gives a shit? He has the best band in the world. Like, he's allowed to be. He's allowed to be. You know? And
I don't hate on U2. In fact, Joshua Tree is one of my top 10 favorite albums. I think it's a great record. And if you're going to start, if we're going to start laying down best rock bands of all time, they've got to be in there somewhere, despite all the other nonsense. And I can't even say I've listened to a U2 album in the past however many years, but I still recognize what was there. I'll tell you what, I saw Springsteen put on a great freaking concert. Springsteen played a 3-hour concert and played an acoustic intermission while his band rested. But I mean, it was just
that's awesome.
Freaking tastic. But best concert I have ever been to, believe it or not, was Chickenfoot. Sammy Hagar.
Oh, nice.
Chickenfoot.
Right.
Love them.
What a great show. What a great show. Yeah.
Wow. They're unbelievable.
That was awesome.
The best show I've ever been to was I've been to Foo Fighters a few times, and they put on a great live show.
Yeah.
Actually, I told my wife this. One of the best shows I ever went to was the Cars, and I didn't even
Cars are great.
Yeah. Well, when I was in college, I did landscaping, and guy I worked with won front row tickets from the radio to see the Cars and the Steve Miller Band, and he's like, "Do you want to go?" At that point, I didn't even listen to that type of music too much, and I was like, "Sure," and I was just blown away. Like, the show was amazing. These guys were pretty old at that point, and they put on a show.
Joel, you were talking about Maryland bands and stuff. One band that I really didn't have an interest in, I went to a concert and I fell in love with them by their live performance. Clutch.
Oh yeah. They're still out there. They're still doing it. They still bring it.
Oh my God.
Incredible.
They're just
right.
And they became one of my favorite bands after seeing them live. They're untouchable. They're untouchable. What a great show.
They were like on every bill. Like they worked, man. They were like, you would go to a show and it'd be like, oh, Clutch is playing. Of course they're playing. They play every show. Like, they were doing like 12 shows a week. I'm not even kidding. Like, it was crazy. Like, everywhere up here was like Clutch. And like, that band worked their ass. And they're still doing it. And they still do solid work.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And they're doing it like their own thing. Like, I think all their stuff's on their own label now too, but their CDs look good. Their shows sound good. They're it's the only band I know that can do a metal version of all the lyrics are the recipe to making crab cakes. I mean, these guys are just,
yeah, awesome. They're awesome. Yeah. Clutch is great.
What's hysterical is my brother is a huge Gwar fan, and Gwar, I every year I would do Scares That Care book signing. I would do it. It's a 3-day horror convention. It's a charity that helps out. Every year they pick out 3 people in need who need medical assistance, and all the funds raised from this charity go to supporting these folks. And so I would go to this every year, and I'd sign books and hang out. And it was you meet people, you drink, you sign books. And Gwar, 2 of the guys from Gwar were across from me at a table, and I don't know Gwar from shit. I don't know, but my brother loves Gwar. So I go over, and they're in the full stuff, right? So I go over to the table, and they're selling CDs. I'm like, I'm going to buy some CDs. You got to sign it for my brother John. He loves you guys and everything. Well, these guys take off their helmet. There was all styrofoam stuff. They take off these things.
Right. Yeah, it's awesome.
They look like a science teacher you had in middle school. And they're
probably were.
They're like, whoa, all right, dude. What do you like? They were the most nerdiest guys. I'm like, you're Gwar? Should you be killing somebody with the giant bloody penis? I don't know. But no, you're sitting here sweating and checking your watch because you don't want to miss Dateline. I don't know what the hell they were doing. I'm like, that was wild.
That's how Slipknot was when I did some film work up here in like '99. They were playing a venue called Local Bazooka, and I remember hanging out with the guys from Slipknot, and was like, oh wait, shit, you're Corey from Slipknot, and like you're Joey, like it just they were out of makeup, so I was like, oh, because they had the mask on, but I was like, oh no shit, like I'm just talking to these guys.
The hell they are.
Yeah, I did get to meet Les Claypool at that show. That was cool. I talked to him for a little bit. Yeah,
no kidding.
Super. And he talks how he sings, which is hilarious too. So I was like, thanks for coming out to the show, man. Like, awesome.
Good.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Like, Les was fun. That was a great. I was just some dumb schmuck that got to film them. I got to meet all these guys back behind stage, and I'm just nobody. But it was so cool.
Awesome,
it was so
man.
fun.
It
was so fun. Yeah, it was a great time. So I should get back into it, but it's hard with to your point earlier with family and stuff, right? It's hard to get in those scenes and do all that stuff.
And especially now. I mean, we got a bunch of, so we just started booking some show dates, and we got a couple of gigs. You were talking about going to Towson, so we have a gig in November booked in Towson.
Is that Rector?
What's that?
That Rector Theater?
It's not. We have one at Record that's in January. We
it's still around. Good, that's awesome.
It is. Well, you know what? It's shut down. They just redid it. They just reopened it. I don't know, 6 months ago.
They had a great green room. That green room was fantastic out back. Like that was like one to be emulated.
They had a great green room, and we played. The last show we played before COVID hit and we shut everything down was at the Baltimore Soundstage, and their green room. You've made it when your green room has like a shower in it, like where you.
That's a good move. That's
where they have a coffee machine and a shower. Like you're like, wow, what goes on back here?
Right.
And again, you're like a 44-year-old dude just going, man, where can I get some chicken nuggets?
Throw on a batch of coffee.
The appreciation changes when you're older.
They probably had some acts that had that in their riders. Like, we have to have a shower available at our discretion. Like, all right,
it was there, man. It was there. It was cool.
Yeah, that's a good move.
Guys, when we're talking about two things, those two things seem so unrelated. Like playing a band and writing books, doing comics. But actually, there's a very, very narrow street between those things. And when you think about your works, and if you had to summarize it into a band, what band will translate it better, in your opinion? Which one?
What band would translate my work better?
Who does the soundtrack for Come With Me?
You're writing work. Yeah, soundtrack.
Who does the soundtrack for Come With Me? Who would you want to have on that if it was made into a film?
Well, it is funny because so I listen to a lot of music when I write, and I try to listen to music that fits the mood of what I'm writing. The book I'm writing now that I'm struggling with, it has been, and I've, much to my wife and my kids' chagrin, has been nothing but circus music. And I kid you not, I have circus music on vinyl, like not just circus music, but I also have like the 3 LP version of Richard Bellis's soundtrack to the 1990 miniseries of It that I've been playing on repeat, as well as John Carpenter's Christine soundtrack on vinyl. So my family, once that needle hits the record, they're out of the house. They're like, I can't.
That's a good move.
3 hours of circus music. I know. So that's the thing I'm working on now. Come With Me was more 80s influence, and actually there's certain chapters in the book where songs are mentioned when they pop up on this Alexa machine. That was the song that was playing whenever, and I got to that sentence, I put it in there. Nice. So yeah, and the interesting thing with that is I'm trying to. I don't want to give too much away, but
it's so hard with that book.
There are clues in some of the song titles that are figured out.
Yeah,
they were all random playing as I'm writing, and I'm like, that's awesome! Holy crap! It's like when you you're like on the right track of writing something, man, it just works. So yeah, Come With Me.
You got to recognize that.
Yeah.
If you recognize that synchronicity. happens all the time. You point
and,
out,
and
yeah.
you love it because you're like, yes, it's vindicated. Like they're telling me I'm on the right path. Whoever it is, they're telling me I'm on the right path.
Yeah, it's a validation
awesome.
you need.
Yeah, like so, John, you were talking about the Narrows. The Narrows was a book that was originally had a different. It was originally called Dread's Hand when I was younger. I wrote that as a kid, and I wrote the entire thing listening back to back nonstop John Cougar Mellencamp's Scarecrow album. That book to me that's what it is. And the funny thing with that is Dread's Hand was sort of like a theme for the Narrows. When I changed when the Narrows became the Narrows, I got rid of the title Dread's Hand and chucked it out the window and used it later for the name of the Alaskan town in my novel Bone White. So I kind of stuck that
had to use
I always
it,
liked the phrase, so I stuck it in there. It's the name of the town. But yeah, I do. I have certain books have a certain soundtrack in my head, for that reason, just to create again the atmosphere, the mood.
You kind of
would you ever do
energy onto your words.
What's that?
Maybe you can also imprint that kind of energy into your phrasing, your wording style. Yeah, it all comes together, I believe.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and there's, it's weird, but as a writer, I don't often listen to the lyrics of songs in music. I like the emotion of the music, regardless of the lyrics. And sometimes, even if you don't understand what a singer is saying, and you think you come up with something else. Sometimes that's better when you learn what it really is. You're like, oh, that's it. I remember that old 80s song, Smooth Operator, like Smooth Operator. For whatever reason, as a kid, I thought it was Smooth Out the Red Eye. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. That sounds filthy and awesome, but
I'm glad to hear that. That's how I mean, my wife hates that about me because she's definitely a words person when it comes to songs, and she'll like embarrass me because if I'm singing a song, she'll be like, "That's not even the words," and I'm like, and like a classic song, and I still to this day, and she'll be like, "How do you not know the words to this song?" I'm like, and so she picks on me all the time because I'm atmosphere, like the sound of the song, like that's totally where I go.
And that's just it. Because I look at it or listen for it in a different way. It's hitting a different button for me, And I have friends of mine who say, they're like, "You're a writer. You don't pay attention to lyrics." I'm like, really? I don't. I'm listening to this for a different reason.
I'm a big Sigur Rós fan, and he sings in either Icelandic, like John Z from Sigur Rós, or he makes up his own language called Hopelandic, which is a made-up language, and it drives my wife crazy. It's like I have no idea what he's saying. Like it doesn't matter; it's an instrument. And it was like the same in like metal bands. Like some of those lyrics are you can't understand what the hell the guy's saying. I don't care what he's saying. It's adding. It's like a vocal instrument in many ways, And then you go read the lyrics, and you're like, shit, these are actually pretty good lyrics. Like you should be more audible, I guess, or for lack of a better word. I don't know, but. Yeah.
Well, and that's why I love soundtracks. I mean, they're all instrumental. I'm a huge jazz fan. I love jazz music. I listen to jazz a lot. A lot of remember I wrote the book Floating Staircase, back-to-back jazz records, just listening to jazz, writing that whole book, and it just and I really think it influences the mood of a novel. Somehow you transmit what you're hearing to the page.
Was Floating Staircase what put you on the map? I feel like that's when I look back, that's the book that I see coming up the most in the beginning.
So probably I'd say that there's been different books that have helped at a different level. My book Snow that I think you mentioned earlier on, that was my first book with a mass market publisher. That was with Leisure Dorchester Books. At the time that book came out, I mean, that was the place to be. If you wanted to be a paperback horror writer, you went to Leisure Books, and that was like a dream of mine. And for years, I was sending the editor over there, Don Daria. I would send him manuscripts, and he's like, "It's good. You're a good writer, but this is not what Leisure put a vampire in here. This is not what Leisure does. It's not, So and I got very discouraged because I was doing nothing but small press books up until that point. And I got very discouraged, and I said, I remember having a conversation with my wife, and I said, I have an idea for a like Snow Phantoms novel. I don't even know what to call it. I said, but it's very much what I think Leisure would buy, and I'm going to prove to myself that I could write it and sell it to this publisher. And so, normally, how this works is you write an entire novel, hit up an editor, send them, a couple of chapters, and if they like what they read, they ask you to send the full manuscript in. Well, I wasn't going to waste my time, so I wrote 3 chapters. And what I thought was the synopsis of the novel, and I sent it into Don. I said, "Here's the next thing. Let me know if you want to see the manuscript." And he'd been rejecting my shit left and right up until now. He reads it, he goes back, he goes, "Yes, I want to see the full manuscript. This is what I'm talking about." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I hadn't written it. So I said, "Well, I'm on vacation with my wife right now." I said, "We're going to be back in 2 weeks. I will get you this. I will get you the book when I get back." And I was working a day job at the time too, and I took off 2 weeks to leave from work. I told my wife, I'm going to be in the basement, coffee in the morning, whiskey at night. Let's make this happen. And I wrote that entire novel in 2 weeks.
Are you kidding me?
Wow. Yeah, I sent it in, and they bought it. So Leisure really kind of bumped me up because it was my first mass market publication. It was in the bookstores. It was in the airports. It was all over the place. People started talking about it online. They started recognizing what I was doing. When, unfortunately, like a month later, Leisure went bankrupt, and they folded, and all the books went away. So I was also working with a Medallion Press at the time too, another publisher doing some other stuff. And I was under a 3-book deal with Leisure. I took the remaining 2 books from Leisure to Medallion, which was Floating Staircase and Cradle Lake. So I had a following from Snow. Floating Staircase then was the next book released, and all the people who read Snow jumped on and picked up Floating Staircase, and it was nominated for a Stoker Award for Best Novel. And that so those 2 books together, I think, kind of bumped me up into an arena that I hadn't been in before. And it was that kind of set me to a place where I'm like, all right, this could be my job. I could do this now.
Yeah, that's great.
That's quite interesting. And you mentioned something about getting rejected, which most of us have been, somewhere in time. And if you could list some of your early mistakes, let's suppose there's some aspiring writers now watching you. Would you give some kind of advice, some like the do and don'ts, a short list, that whatever comes to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of rejections I received, I could fill up this room with them at the time. And that was back when they actually would mail you back your submission with your self-addressed stamped envelope and say, no, hey, no thanks. So I had paper to show I was no good. You got to have a tough skin, and you just got to say, all right, well, they didn't get it. Doesn't mean I'm not good. I'm going to keep doing it. And maybe I was naive enough to never get, kind of swayed by their rejections or their opinions. I just felt like, hey, when the time was right and I give them the right person the right thing, it'll happen. And that's stupidly, maybe, I don't know, but that's kind of how I continued. So I never got really dejected by it or felt like, man, this isn't going to work out, or I was just not going to be a writer. I just pursued it, and I did it blindly, almost, just to say it's going to happen. It's inevitable, and I'm just going to keep pursuing it. And that's how I followed it. I mean, that's the global answer. The more specific answer is, if you're going to start submitting stuff, know who you're submitting to. Don't be a jerk about it. Be professional and know the venue. There are plenty of publishers, smaller publishers, independent publishers out there who will take a look at an unagented manuscript. You don't need an agent. Send it in. They'll take a look at it. If you want to shoot for bigger publishers, you'll find an agent, and you'll have to write a query letter, and you'll have to send them, just like I did with the publisher with my sample chapters. You'll have to send an agent sample chapters, and go that way. I was my career is not built on luck or anything out of the gate where I just kind of lucked into something. This was, I started off with a small press, and then my second book was with a bigger, smaller press, and then my third book was with a bigger, smaller press, until my fourth book was with a mass market publisher. And these were connections I made as I moved up that ladder, writing this other stuff. By the time I got to that fourth book with a big publisher, they had already, the editor I spoke to was already somewhat aware of my previous books. They knew they existed. Same thing with my agent. I didn't get an agent until, let me think. I'm 15 or 16 novels in. I'd say by novel 12 is when I got my agent. So, and when I got that agent, I sent query letters to a bunch of agents, and I want to say maybe I sent it to 12 agents. 8 of them got back to me and said, "We're familiar with you. We love your stuff. We're fans of your work. Send it to us." Because I've already built something behind me. I wasn't coming in blind. I wasn't shooting for the stars. I built something behind me that they thought they could capitalize on and do something more with, because I was limited in the arena I currently was. And that's how I signed with my book agent. And then from there, more book deals. I signed with a film agent, and from there we had film stuff happen. And it was all a building process. That's how I know to make it happen. And you could, anybody who wants to start, who wants to be a success in this industry, can gamble and say, I'm going to put everything, write one book, and I'm going to see if I can sell it to Random House and see if they buy it and give me $1 million. Great, go for it. But for me, it was hard work and building a career, and not just a one-off for one book that I thought I could write.
Yeah, that's awesome tips for people out there. I guess so. Before you did that, where you were doing it full time, I think a lot of aspiring writers too, struggled to get a routine in. How did that work for you when you did have the day job? Like, what did it look like for you writing wise?
No, I mean, by the time I was, well, to even back up, I mean, my first book was published in 2000. It was a very small press, and it was the year after I graduated college. So I didn't have a day job when I was in college. I went to school. But by the time I graduated college, I had 6 novels written.
Wow.
And I picked the best out of those 6, and I said, this is the one I'm going to send out and hopefully put off getting a real job. and that first, and it got bought by a small publisher. That doesn't mean I got to sit back and smoke a pipe and wear patches on my sports jacket and talk about being a writer. It was a real wake-up call, really, and what writing actually meant, So that book was published. I got a job. I had my second book published. I was still working my job. I had a third book published. I was still working, and it got to a point where, you again, I was in my 20s, younger, no kids, got married at some point in the way there, but I could work 8-10 hours a day, come home, eat dinner, watch a movie with my wife, and then stay up till 3 a.m. writing my stories. It's a little tougher to do that now, with 2 kids and being 44 years old. But I do try to, like I said, my back then I was doing the 15 pages a day. Now it's, if I've got a deadline, I procrastinate for 6 months, and then I write 40, 50 pages in a weekend, and then I quiver and shake for the rest of the week, and then 40, 50 pages again. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a different process, but I just get it done. And I'm a bit OCD with my writing. Like, if I know I got to write the rest of this chapter, I'll burn through it. I will just stay up all night and just go through it, so.
That's great.
Yeah.
I, for myself, like, I have a day job obviously still, but I can't get up any earlier. My kids are up at 6 a.m. I mean, I guess I could get up at 4 a.m., but I can't imagine my brain would function. So, all Joel and I will be up till 1, 2 in the morning, talking. Well, Rogerio too now. Actually, it's like we're up till 1, 2 in the morning talking. I'm writing or whatever, and my wife will be like, "You need to start getting sleep." I'm like, I don't know when else I can do this.
Yeah.
And we got 2 kids. I can't sit there writing at the dinner table. So. So I'm always curious how that works out. But yeah, I think we have a lot of, because we're indie comic people, right? Like, so I think we have a lot of people that watch that are in the indie industry, and it's good to hear people that have had success and how they got to it. So.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever see yourself writing like a rock opera for your band, like a Meatloaf, like Bat Out of Hell style, like do something like that, where you can translate some of your writing into like a whole album or anything, like anything like that?
Nope. No interest in that.
Choose them separate. He's never gonna. There'll never be a rock star lead character in your book. Like
you know what? I say
stand.
that now. You're gonna hold me to that. I don't know. No, it just doesn't. I get sidetracked. Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned some film stuff. Are any of your books getting approached by anybody like that to be turned into like major films or anything? Because I could see like Come With Me was like, I mean, this thing would translate to film awesomely. Like this would be perfect for that. So I don't know if you're being approached by anything like that, or if there's anything you could share with us that you may have in the works like that.
Yeah, I mean, I could share minimally. Well, Come With Me was bought by NBC Universal for a TV series. So
congratulations! That's awesome.
They're
That's awesome.
Developing that right now. The book before that, Bone White, was picked up by Fox and Disney and was set to be an Amazon original series. COVID killed that. I mean, I watched that die on the table. It's still potentially into some form of may happen, but it just got COVID just wrecked it. The same producers who were doing Bone White were the people doing the Fargo TV series and The Handmaid's Tale. And when COVID hit, they got a season behind on each of those shows. So my show got like 2 years down the road beyond so the option agreement on that was 2 years. So like they were kicking this thing down the road beyond the option period. And I think after jerking around with COVID and everything, they just decided, this is just let's cut our loss. So that's where that one. So I watched that one freaking die on the table. But Come With Me is viable, and NBC Universal really liked it. They've got a great screenwriter who I've become very friendly with, working on the pitch for it. They've got some talent interested in being in it, and hoping. Until they start filming these things, they just can fall apart at any moment. But it's been kind of cool. And then in between those 2 books, I also wrote a series pilot for an original series that's not based on any book of mine that was also picked up by Fox and Disney, and they're in the process right now of developing that. So I've got like 3 things right now, kind of in the works.
That's awesome. So. Come With Me. I mean, I could see that as a series. That's so cool, because like you think so many series, like even because a lot of what's done now, like with HBO, is they have these 1-season shows, like Sharp Objects, that was based off a novel, or The Outsider, like, so I could see it in that vein, just playing out over like a really tense season. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think the idea for the show right now is to make the novel be the first season, and then original story content beyond that, if it goes beyond, or whatever happens. But it's been a joy for me with that one to really kind of speak with the writer working on it, and bouncing ideas. And sometimes you meet these writers and they're a little stiff, and they're not whatever. This guy is awesome, and I don't even know if I could say his name, so I won't do it. But he's awesome, and we've really hit it off. And probably if there wasn't a pandemic, I would have hopped on a plane to LA and got drunk with him.
So. Oh man.
Yeah, Ronald, I do believe that what makes a great actor or writer is their history. How much you can relate to your past, how much you can translate it into your words, how much you can put emotion onto what you do. And like supposedly, I read stuff. I might be wrong because my sources were not trustworthy. But I read that you had a kind of shaky upbringing, some hardships and moving from here to there all the time, not making roots anywhere when you were young. And how much of that hardship made you what you are now? How much of that you bring to your works? How much of that you kind of pass on to people that you reach out?
Well,
Writing.
yeah, I mean, so my father was a Secret Service agent. So when I was a young kid, we relocated around the country a lot, and I moved not like a military kid, but by the time I was like 9 years old, I've lived in like 4 or 5 places. So I don't know how much of that. I'm sure there's a part of whatever that brings to the table that I put into my writing, but I think more so what that brought out was my love of reading, and if you pick up every 18 months and go somewhere else and leave your friends behind, books are friends you carry with you. If that sounds like a Hallmark card, I don't know. But, so I wound up, becoming an avid reader because at a young age, because I moved around a lot. And then probably when we settled here in Maryland, and I was like 9 or 10 years old, the group of friends that I found here, I became very close with, and I stayed close with, because it was the first time I'd never had to pick up and leave again. We stayed here, and these were friends that became very, very important to me growing up, and they were friends from when I was 9 and 10 through high school, through college, I talk to them now. I know these guys now in our 40s, and as far as how that translates to my writing, my novel December Park, I wrote a book called December Park, which is about 5 boys growing up in the 90s in a Maryland suburb. That is me and my friends growing up. I added a, serial killer backdrop to that novel and made it a genre piece, but it's me and my friends growing up. And that was my, kind of homage to, my childhood, and saying, hey, thanks guys, I appreciate it. Even the friends I don't talk to as much anymore, And I did see the PRS comment. I saw the PRS guitar. I could actually throw a rock and hit the PRS factory. And there is, so I'm the only guitarist in my band that doesn't play a PRS. I play Fender Stratocasters, but my other guitar player is a PRS. He's a PRS sponsored artist. Him and John Mayer. So yeah. But I'm just a knucklehead.
I don't even play guitar, but I have an itch to get a Fender 12 electric just because they're so badass and so cool looking. Yeah, to have that, right? Yeah,
fact,
that thing's sweet.
This is this is what I'm using. This is for practice later tonight.
Oh, nice. So, there you go. I was going to ask if you had a go-to guitar. I mean, you got quite the array back there.
I got 3 that I take on the road with me. It's this one. This is sort of a, what is it? It's a Fender Strat, but it's a Mexican. It's got the double humbucker on the bridge, but I've got an American Strat that's like my go-to. And then, like I said, my brother is a guitar. He's a luthier, so he designs guitars. And he's got a company called Free State Custom Guitars. So I've got one of his that is just, it's a sweet guitar. So it's got like the dual rail hammer pickups on, and this thing just lights up. I mean, I'm not as good a guitarist as someone needs to be to play this guitar. So it's awesome.
Do you go crazy with like the pedal? Do you do the pedal array? Like you one of those guys have like the pedal board?
I got a distortion. I've got a flange. I've got a couple of other shit. But I mean, I'm a singer, so for the most part, I don't have a lot of time to look down and jerk around with pedals. Our lead guitarist is untouchable. This guy, Ryan Fowler, he's also the lead guitarist in the Kelly Bell Band, which is a huge Maryland band out here. A lot of blues oriented. We're more alternative rock style. But guys, the guy is just awesome. So I frankly, I could probably just put down my guitar on stage and not even play it. This guy can just cover it. But it makes me feel like I could hide behind something when I'm holding it. So
the band that sold me on the Fender 12 was we saw Mogwai. I don't know if you're familiar with them, like an instrumental, but they had the Fender 12 live, and I'm like, that is the shit, man. Like, man. I remember we geeked out and we went up, past the security barrier after the show just to take photographs of their pedal array. And I mean, this thing had to be 16 feet long, what they were using for effects. I mean, it was insane. Like, just their gear was like.
Let me see if I can let me see if I could. I'm in my brother's basement. This is like our practice space, but you can see all the guitars, see the kit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And all that's the trap show we played. We're on the bottom of that flyer and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, it's cool.
And those are all 6-string, right? Those are all regular. There's no.
Yeah, no, they're all 6. Let's see here. Yeah, they're all 6.
I know there's like a bass mandolin. One of them looked like almost like a bass mandolin kind of thing.
I think it's like an old Gretsch. I'm not sure. All right, so that's that last guitar you see right there with the
all the way on the end,
the white pick guard. That's my brother built that one. Yeah.
Nice.
What's that?
Is that a Strat?
Over Veer, can you put your headset back on?
Yeah, you might have to put your headphones back on, buddy. I'm having a hard time.
He probably forgot he took it off, to be honest.
That's all right. When I was 11, Ron, my parents bought me the Wayne's World Fender Strat, like the copy of the Squire. Yeah, and I still have it, and that's actually a desirable guitar now. Like, there was a Japanese Squire, and that plays sweet. That thing's got some good action to it, for what it is.
I don't know so much anymore. It used to be like the Squire was. My first guitar was the Squire. It was the Squire 2, that cherry red Squire 2 that they made for like 2 years or whatever. I still have it. I still play it. I love that.
Yeah, I love my Squire.
More solid than like and I think probably when my parents bought that for me when I was a kid, it was probably like $100. It's awesome. It's awesome. Right? And really, all these things are. I mean, the hardware's tight. The body's tight. You could yank out the pickups and throw whatever you want in there to make it give it a little more zeal. But
it's more about the quality of the wood.
Yeah, the wood.
The wood is different, but it sounds all right.
And it's fun to kind of like I wound up, when we were all quarantined and sitting at home, I wound up going online and buying a ton of cheap, like I bought like 4 guitars, like real, but like cheap $80 guitars, which had all the hardware on it, but like the cheap basswood, and if you hit it hard enough, you can break it. But I bought all these things just to kind of mess around with them, just take them apart, swap out pieces, change the neck, and just kind of start. I didn't want to do that on my nice guitar, so I just spent time kind of taking them apart and seeing what felt right. And and intonation, low action makes it easy to play. Exactly. All that kind of stuff where you're like, all right, let me screw with this bridge and see really what, like I learned based on certain songs that I play, I wound up flipping my, I don't know what they're called, the little nut on, or the little thing on the bridge that holds the string, right? The saddle, right? My high E, I flip it upside down and I drop that string lower than the rest on the bridge. And depending on one guitar, actually the one I showed you, because I like that it just puts it out of the way where I could strum a full barred chord or a full, bar chord and not hit that string when I go all the way down. You learn nuances like that okay, well that sounds kind of cool here, or whatever. Yeah. So a lot of cheap guitar and screwing around with them.
SG is great for that.
Oh yeah. No, and it's just I'm not like a guitar savvy guy. Like I'm more into the writing and the creative side of this stuff. I'm not like a gearhead with a lot of this, but so I can kind of pick up anything and jerk around with it and say, all right, this sounds kind of cool. Let's go with that. So yeah, but I mean, look, it's my version of playing golf, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I suck at playing guitar just as much as I suck at golf, so I guess Yeah, doesn't matter what my hobby is. Um,
John has been very self-deprecating
I
those days.
I mean, you haven't seen me play golf.
No.
My brother has like an 8 handicap or something like that. Like he just crushes the ball. I go golfing like twice a year, and I'm like, why do I do this? Just to get drunk? Like honestly, like that's it. So, but yeah, I wanted to. I mentioned earlier on. Going back to books. Sorry, guys. I know we're talking music here for a
How
bit,
dare
but
you?
so I
Books?
mentioned,
What's
you
that?
know, I mentioned how it was what made me want to write novels. What was it that made you? What book made you realize this is it? This is what I want to do.
You know what? I don't know if it was a particular book. I remember the first. So, with everything when I was younger, I mean, if I listened to music that I liked, I picked up a guitar and tried to learn how to play it. If I read a comic book or watched cartoons, I started to draw. I always wanted to try something artistic. So I remember the first Stephen King book I read was Eyes of the Dragon, which is not really a horror novel.
No, yeah.
But I read it and I'm like, oh, this is cool. So I went and I remember we had like a yard sale in our neighborhood. I bought an old typewriter, went home and I wrote like basically a ripoff of Eyes of the Dragon. It was like 10 pages. And I think even my main character's name was like Alec Baldwin. I don't know. I was just like, I was like 10 years old. I don't know what I was doing. But so I just like I did anything else where I'd play music or I'd draw pictures, I wrote this story. And I kept reading, and every time I read something else, I'd write another story that was kind of similar to it. And then I started writing my own stuff, not based on the stuff I was reading, and that progressed. And after a while, I realized I'm doing my own thing, and I love it. And I have a trunk full of, it must be 50 or 60 of these typed stories where I even drew the covers were all hand drawn. I'd staple them together. I'd make my parents and my grandmother read them, and there were kind of mile markers in writing them. I remember when I first broke over 10 pages. I'm like, oh, that's cool, but I've got some of them that are, I look back now and I was like 10 years old and I wrote like 200-page manuscripts.
Wow.
And I was just like on fire. And then I got like I was a kid, but we got like our first electric typewriter, and that was cool, And what really, I remember saving up money to buy. These were these typewriters where they had the little daisy wheel, like in, for the font in the thing. And I was like the nerd kid who saved up his money to buy the italic daisy wheel, so I could exchange the font and write italicized thoughts in my text of my books.
Wow.
Man, I was like, that was like it. I'm like, oh, I've arrived. I could die happy. I have italics on my page. This is so cool. It looks just like Stephen King, and I was awesome. Then the next thing was the smart quotes. You can get like the curly quotes instead of the straight ones. Oh, you were cooking, man. So like, and I never even I didn't even have a computer. I went through college in like from 90. When the hell I graduated? I went from college from 95 to 99 without a computer. And I never had a computer in my home until I was dating and moved in with my wife, and she had a laptop. I'm like, oh, what's this curious thing? So yeah. So I mean, like, there wasn't one book that made me say it. It was just a process of writing and just being in love with writing that stuck with me. And there was never really a point where I said, this is what I want to do. It was almost like it was always there. Like I just, as I wrote, said, okay, I'll be a writer someday. That works for me. That seems to fit who I am, and I just kind of kept doing it without realizing how hard it was.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Speaking of that, what's the best part of your work? Is when you see someone reading what you do, is when you see someone doing a nice reveal, or it's just the acting of getting that done? What's the
man? I'll tell you. I mean, look, I love people reading my stuff. I like getting nice reviews. I'm thrilled that the book Come With Me is getting as positive a reception as it is. But for me, honestly, the best that I feel is, when you think up a story that you want to write and turn into a book, you have this idea in your head, and it comes fully formed with the emotion, sort of like when you wake up from a dream, you're like, oh, that made me feel this way, right? Book ideas do that to me. And for me, the biggest success I have is if I'm able to translate what's in my head onto the page as close as I can do it without screwing it up and making it something else, then I think it's a success. Because as soon as you write that first word, it's already fucked up. It's already not as good as it is in your head. It's like I say, if I told you paint a dream you had, it's never going to be as good as the dream you had, right? It's always a lesser quality. So the books are the same way. So for me, a successful book personally is if I can get close enough to what that initial feeling was when I first thought of that. That to me, that's the success. And like I said, I've had 15 or 16, 17 novels published. Maybe 3 of them have done that for me. Maybe 3 have come that close, 3 or 4. So I consider those to be the big successes where I'm like, wow, I actually harnessed an emotion and got it down, and that's the creative part of it. It has nothing to do with sales numbers or how many books sold or what reviews are. That's strictly as an artist saying, I'm happy with what I've done. Because I'm very rarely, most artists I know, whether they're writers, musicians, painters, if they're very good, they never think they're very good. At best, they think they're just okay.
Yeah.
And at worst, they think they're terrible. If a writer ever says, I'm great, read my book, they're terrible. They suck. No writer I know with anything ever thinks they're good. Every writer I know that's great thinks they're just barely getting by. That's the process. That's the creative process. All that self-doubt you got to fight through.
That's fantastic. I agree 100%. But don't you know that sometimes it can happen that you write something and somebody derives so much more than you thought that they could have, and then you just realize, oh God, I am really great.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes from. I firmly believe that there's sort of an inherent thematic flow to creativity, where when I write, I have when I sit down to write a story, it's the story that I want to tell. It's the characters. I'm not a plot-driven guy, but I am a story-driven guy, and I am a character-driven guy. And once I start putting that down, the themes of what in the bigger scope of what I'm trying to say become clear. So I go back and I kind of refine some of those things, and I make them work here and I make them work there. And I hope that when someone reads this, they can read the story at the surface level and get what they want from it, or they can read it deeper on the thematic level and get something more from it. So, when readers are able to do that, I think it's great. Like when they're able to figure that out, and it's not only great, I'm not only saying, hey, they were a great reader, good for them. It's some validation for me saying, wow, I was able to kind of get that second idea across to the readership. It's I mean, I've read reviews of stuff where people they opine on certain things that are completely off the wall that were not my intention. All right, that's cool. Other people who don't get what I'm trying to do and they criticize it for that, that's their prerogative. I've had other people who point out stuff with the books that didn't work for them, and it's made me go, wow, all right, that makes sense. I could see that. I could see why that didn't work for that person, and maybe that's something I consider. So, I kind of take it all in, for what it is. But, everybody comes into this, any kind of art, whether it's reading, listening to music, looking at a painting, with their own baggage and their own mental, their history, their own blueprint of who they are into the process. So you're bringing a part of yourself. So I can only do what I can do here, and it's up to whoever reads the book to also bring a part of themselves into it, and that's how they interpret it. So I write them knowing that, I go into that understanding that that's how art works, you know?
Yeah. No doubt about it.
Oh,
Right.
I know we mentioned hour and a half, 2 hours. We're at hour 45 now, so I want to be aware of the time here. Did you say are you practicing after we're done with this? You guys are gonna go in and jam out?
No, we practiced last night. We had a show.
I thought you said you were doing it when we were done here. I'm like, damn.
I did. I was screwing around. No, it's too late here.
Okay. Jeez. This whole time I'm like, man, I'm gonna go up and
I'm gonna drink a couple of beers and eat some crabs tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Makes me feel a little better.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Are any of the characters from your previous novels, are they going to come back around in other novels where they kind of in the same universe and they end up crossing paths? Is that something ever to do, or?
Yeah, kind of like the latter. I mean, none of my stuff is connected except for the fact that sometimes things are kind of connected a little bit. I like the idea of creating this kind of mythos or a world where all my fiction kind of exists, even if the stories are independent of themselves, where a character's name may be mentioned in one story and you'll read a book about him, or something about him in another story. I find that, something about that just from, I guess it's the same, I do it the same way, I guess filmmakers put Easter eggs in movies. They think it's cool and fans like that kind of stuff, I guess, the, probably the closest I ever, the most blended I ever did is when I wrote Floating Staircase. Floating Staircase started out as like an 800-page novel, and then I realized I had this weird miscarriage between the main character and his wife. She had multiple miscarriages in the novel that didn't fit thematically with the book I was writing, and I realized this is another story, so I chopped off like half of those pages from Floating Staircase and just threw them in a drawer. And Floating Staircase became its own entity, and that's the book that was published as Floating Staircase. What I realized is the follow-up book to Floating Staircase was a book called Cradle Lake, and that is about a husband and wife who have suffered a series of miscarriages, and they move to this town where they find that the lake behind their town, which is kind of based on an old Cherokee legend, is a healing lake that will allow them to have children, and of course, to dire consequences. But so the pages I pulled out of Floating Staircase became Cradle Lake. Well, I was writing, I had turned in Floating Staircase and was writing Cradle Lake at the same time. And I was dealing with the same editor at the publishing house. And there's a scene in the book where both of the main characters are for the necessity of plot, are overcome by a sickness for like 24-hour period and have this fever, and they kind of have this hallucination. And my editor said, it's a very similar scene in both books. Why don't you lose it in one of the books? I said, all right, you're right. And the reason it's similar is because it was basically the same novel that I pulled in half. I said, all right, let me pull it out of one of the books. So I went to pull it out and I said, wait a minute, you know what's cool? Instead of pulling it out, why don't I enhance their hallucinations and blend the books together? So in each novel, the character, when they have their hallucination, hallucinates the other person's story. Like,
that's cool.
The Floating Staircase guy hallucinates what's happening in Cradle Lake, and the Cradle Lake guy hallucinates what's happening in Floating Staircase. I'm like, that is all. Like, so I turned it in. I didn't take it out. In fact, I owned it. And she's like, yeah, that's cool. Let's do that, And readers pick it up and they're like, wow, what is the nexus there? And so when you talk about themes and things that you didn't intend but readers pick up on, here's a perfect example. So in Floating Staircase, the main character is this fellow named Travis Glasgow, and Travis is a horror writer who writes books all with the theme, with some kind of water theme, right? His novel Waterview just came out. He did a book called like Moon River or something like that. And as you're reading Floating Staircase, you realize that he's writing Floating Staircase, and the floating word is the water theme that I'm using. What readers picked up on, that was not my intention, was that Cradle Lake has a water theme, and Cradle Lake is another Travis Glasgow novel that he wrote under my pen name. And I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. I didn't do that on purpose. Readers picked up on that.
That's
I
awesome.
thought that was so cool. So yeah, I mean that feeds right into what you were saying, man. That's like, you know, when someone finds that out, I'm like, that never occurred to me. That was cool.
Yeah,
You could have just
fantastic.
gone with it. Go, like, yeah, this
You
is a
know
master
what?
plan.
Yeah, you know what? Let's delete this segment. I'm going to say that.
Yeah, we can edit it and post. Yeah, we'll edit it.
Yeah. You might as well do. So I believe that you're a great believer in building momentum and getting to the flow.
Yeah,
like everything is going smooth, and you don't know, and you just written a great chapter out of nothing. You know, like sometimes that can happen. You know, that happens to all of us. And what source do you think you can access apart from your own subconscious mind? Do you think there is a kind of as Jung used to say, what's the name of it? It's unconscious.
yeah, I know.
Kind of universe, a parallel universe that you can access things and get things from that place. Do you believe in that kind of stuff?
Look, I believe that I've done some pretty good writing when I've been drunk. And then I've had to go back. I've had to go back and clean up a lot of it after the fact. Okay. You know what? Look, if there's a way to tap into the muse, the you know, creative vein, you know, out there, we'd all be doing it every day, and it wouldn't be art, I guess. I don't know. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. I think that some days you just have good days, sometimes you have bad days, and that's like that with anything. And I'm sure, Joel, you probably know that with music too. There's some days you could sit down and write 5 songs, and then there's a week where you go, everything sounds like crap. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know why. You know, it's the same with writing. And a lot of times the most frustrating thing is sometimes you'll write something and go, this is really good. And then the next day you wake up and you go, what was that idiot thinking? This is not good. This needs to be redone. I rewrite books over and over, particularly the beginning and the end of a novel. I will rewrite 8, 10, 12 times, a few chapters, just over and until I get that right voice. Like, you know what? Come With Me is a great example. So Come With Me is, I knew the story I wanted to tell. I knew the characters. I knew how I wanted it to start. And it's not a spoiler. I mean, in the opening chapter of the novel, the main character's wife is killed in a mall shooting, you know, by a mass shooter. And I knew that was going to be the opening of that book. I wrote that chapter 5 or 6 times because I couldn't find the voice, and it just didn't sound right. And I wrote it in third person. I wrote it in first person. I wrote it in present tense. I wrote it in I'm like, something is not clicking here for me. And it wasn't until I realized, wait a minute, the answer is, it's not first person, third person. It is this weird bastardization of first person and second person, where the narrator is talking directly to his dead wife. So by the first page of that novel, you know this woman is going to die by the end of this chapter. That's where it clicked off. I'm like, that's how this story has to be told. And that brings in the emotional aspect of it, the heart element, the sympathy you have for this main character, and his voice just came crystal clear as soon as I realized that's the narrative structure that this novel wants. And, you know, when you, as a writer, you know, when you luck into something like that, that's gold. Like when I realized that's the voice that this book had to carry all the way through, I'm like, now it's going to write itself. And it kind of did. It kind of, right when I realized that, it kind of went from there. But I have 5 or 6 versions of that first chapter where it's done in a same thing happens. The voice just didn't work. And I'm like, this is crap. This is crap. This is crap. Why isn't it working? Why isn't the story that I want to tell? I kept going back to the fact that a mistake that I was making was that his wife left, and I wasn't and I was making her death by this shooting thing at the end of the chapter. I was trying to spring it on the reader, make it a surprise by like, oh wow, this is what that's what happens at the end. And I realized that's a mistake, because what's my build up to that? Like, where's the tension there? Because if you don't know that's something. So I realized, no, if I tell them from the almost the first sentence, certainly the first page of that book, that, hey, this person is going to die. You're about to learn how this is going to happen. Come with me here, And oh, by the way, not only is this person going to die, but I'm talking directly to you as if you're that person. You are going to die. Follow me now,
Yeah.
And that just clicked, and it just really worked. It's, for me, that's the hardest part of writing book, is finding that initial voice. I think of it as a window, finding that window into the story, that correct way to tell it. Anybody can tell the same story. It's how you tell it that makes it, memorable or unique or worthwhile of even telling,
Yeah. I mean, that's as an aspiring writer, that's awesome to listen to. I could sit here and talk all day about this. So, but I don't even know the last book I read that was really in that second person narration. So that definitely made the book. So, and I think anyone that's read it would probably agree to that. So,
you made the right call. Letter feel to it too, right? It feels like a love letter, right? It's like he's writing a love letter to his late wife. Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, I hadn't seen anything like that before.
And I felt like it really, it's very easy to fall into the cliches with that kind of that grief and mourning and, oh, I love my wife, and it's very easy to make that kind of a narrative very cliche, and I didn't want to do that, and I wanted it to come across genuine and honest and a little bit hurt. And I think that was kind of the point with the way that narrative came across, where if he's telling a generic reader what happened, he's not as vulnerable. If you're going to talk to a stranger about how you feel about your wife, that's different than you talking to your wife about how you feel about your wife. And I realized that was the click for that. Another interesting kind of tidbit with that is, we were talking about the TV series that they're developing about that, and I've been working with the writer who's putting the script together and developing the characters, and he was at first kind of missing the mark on the personality traits of the two main characters, Aaron and Allison, the husband and wife. And I said, well, in the book, Allison wouldn't do this. It would be Aaron who would do this, or the other way around. He said, well, he's like, I'm not really grasping the personality. Like, how do we do that? He said, well, what I did when I wrote the book is I gave Allison, the wife, what would normally be considered a traditional male role in a relationship, and I gave Aaron, the husband, what would normally be considered the female role in the relationship. When you look at histrionic kind of, this is how we view relationships, in our culture. Whereas where I made his wife be the bold, brazen, kind of breadwinning, adventurous, darker personality, and Aaron, the husband, being the more timid, cloistered, hermetic character in the novel. And as soon as I said that to the screenwriter, he got it. He's like, yes. So every time I think about, doing that, I do, I think of the role reversal, and that's how the characters play out, So
the other interesting thing is when you have the second Aaron in there too. So it'd be interesting, like his inner monologue. It'd be interesting to see how you do that in the screenplay version too, how they would translate that over for it too.
You know what? I guess I could talk about it because it's nothing set in stone really with how they decided to do it. But I know some of the ideas they were kicking around were to be, to have the same actor portray himself talking to himself on the screen. One of the cool concepts that I heard kicked around was because Aaron in the book is a Japanese translator, like he translates Japanese novels to English, is that when he talks to other Aaron talks in Japanese and it's subtitled. And I'm like, that is awesome. That is really, because that is how his mind would work. I could see that. So I really like that concept. I think that's pretty unique.
That's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that would be.
He's
pretty
got to come
cool.
with like the beard, like the rough look, like the leather vest, right? He's like more of the.
Oh,
the
now you're going
like,
like George Stark territory,
right? Or Star Trek when they had the goatee. It could be like
Yep.
other Aaron with the goatee, right?
Yeah, he's a little more, you know, he's different. He looks different. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Reminds me of the Lego movie when he runs into himself there, kind of in the future. Like something like that. It's like his alter ego. Yeah.
That's right.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, we got some electric guitar sounding up there. What's that?
I was like, oh, okay, is that what's going on? I was like, what was that?
I don't know. We're coming up on the 2-hour mark. I guess we'll let you go. If you want to keep going, we can go. But if you want to wrap it up, we can do that too. No worries. So that's all good. So let you get the last word in, Ron. So whatever you want to wrap or pitch, go for it, buddy. I'll have you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'd appreciate anybody checking out the new novel. Come with me. It's available wherever you buy your books. It's online. And same with my social media stuff. You know, I'm on Facebook and Twitter. I've got a website that I've seen you guys scrolling at the bottom down there, ronmalfi.com or ronaldmalfi.com, whatever it is. There it is. Look at that. The magic of Hollywood.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you know, read the book. Let me, you know, shoot me an email. Let me know if you love it. If you hate it, keep it to yourself. That's fine. You know, that's where I'm at right now, man. Just promoting the book, and I appreciate you guys having me on. This is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. Really
fun. This has probably been one of my most fun shows. I'll say we talked to a lot of great guests, and they're all fun, but this one's been good because I like the music, so we're able to. And you know what bands I'm talking about? Some people are like, "Who the hell are you talking about?" So it's been good.
I'm right with you, man. In fact, if I had a cigar right now, I'd be smoking it with you.
Hey, come up to New Hampshire, buddy. You're welcome anytime. We'll kick it on the porch up here. Have a good time.
Right on.
Next time you're in the area. So appreciate your time tonight. We'll be back on the next show. We got Brian Keene's coming up, right? Next
Wednesday night.
I love Brian.
Oh man, I love Brian. Yeah, he's coming on Wednesday night, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
Good
Thank you, Ronald.
Yeah, thanks for your time tonight, man. We'll stay close, buddy. And when Blackmouth gets ready to come out there, that's the next book, right?
Yeah, dude.
Working title. Yeah, let us know. Whatever we can do to help you with that. We'd be happy.
I appreciate it.
Push that along. You bet. All right, guys. Have a good night. Everyone out there. We'll catch you on the next show. Stay livid.